No business plan survives contact with the first customer. Mike Tyson puts it in a boxing context. Everyone's got a plan until I punch him in the face,
Hey guys, welcome back to another Foundr interview. We're here in Melbourne, Australia, and today we're sitting down with Tim West. He's the co-founder of a company called 12 Round, which I'm actually a member at, and these guys have the fastest growing boxing franchise in the world. Now, I was so impressed when I went to this studio. Like, it was just so much fun. The systems, everything that they've got going on is incredible. I had to speak to Tim and just hear his background, find out how he's doing all this. So Tim, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me, I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. So the first question that I ask everyone that comes on is, how did you get your job?
Do you know what, this is a question that I get asked a bit, and it's almost just by default because I'm almost unemployable. And so, from a traditional sense. So, the way I see the world, the way I see business, the way I see, the building of businesses, it doesn't make me entirely compatible with being employed. So, the best way for me to control that and to do what I love is to own my own businesses, and therefore now I've got to build them.
Yeah. So, was 12 Round your first company, or what is your background? Where did you start? What was your first business?
Yeah, look, 12 Round's the most relevant because I've been, the janitor through to the owner, so to speak, in fitness. So, starting out wanting to be a professional athlete, but not having the ability, wanting to be in strength and conditioning, because I wanted to be involved in sports, but paying my way through study with personal training.
Yep.
And then into gym ownership in franchising and gym operation, and then into, franchise development. A few steps along the way with technology.
So what was the first gym that you owned? Are you able to share?
Franchise? The first franchise gyms that I owned were some of the first Jets clubs, the first 24-hour clubs in the country.
Yep.
So I was working for Good Life at the time.
Yep.
And then a friend of mine introduced me to the concept of 24-hour gyms.
Yes.
Which of course I thought would never work at the first pass.
Yep.
And then looked at it a little bit more and realised it did satisfy an issue in the market, a customer's need. And so we opened the second 24-hour club in the country after the Foundr's clubs.
And how long ago was this?
It was 2008.
Okay. Yeah,
Great timing, as usual, which was October 2008, so the very day that the GFC was announced.
Yeah, wow. So what happened next?
So we opened 3 in quick succession. It was really successful from the start. So that's when, really understanding the growth power of franchising. Good Life was a company-owned franchise.
Yes.
So they had a different group of restraints. They had capital and HR restraints.
Yes.
But when I saw Jets and the opportunity it gave to fitness professionals to step up into bricks and mortar businesses, and the power of club ownership and operation aligned with investment, and the potential that has for quick growth, I was hooked on that franchising model from that point.
Interesting. So you said you opened up 3 over what period of time?
Over about 9 months.
Wow, okay, that was pretty fast.
Yeah.
And then how did you get the capital to launch all 3 so fast?
Well, it was interesting. It was friends of mine were working away, and they had capital.
Yes.
And I had know-how.
Yes.
So that's where that came together, and with a syndicate investment approach.
Yes.
We were able to get the capital.
Yep.
Given we had operational backgrounds that were complementary,
yes,
we were able to roll them out fairly quickly.
And that was in Brisbane?
In Brisbane,
yep.
Correct.
Okay, and then what happened next?
Well, I always had a strategy when they stopped selling franchise territories in our area, being Brisbane. I knew from that point that supply and demand would have a positive effect on the exit value.
Yes.
So I'd always strategised the day that Jet stopped selling territories in Brisbane, I put all 3 on the market.
Yeah, wow, interesting.
Yeah.
And when was that?
So that was 2010.
Yeah, okay.
And so pretty quick, and in between that I'd invested some capital into a software solution that I thought would help service providers of recurring booking businesses,
Yes.
like PTs.
Yes.
You know, where they were able to do the things that PTs were bad at.
Yep.
Take and manage bookings and take payments. And so, you know, and charge people for not showing up.
Yes.
And so I built a platform that enabled PTs initially to book clients in recurring schedules and charge them in advance for it.
Yep. Like a mind-body software as a service.
Yeah,
Yep.
software as a service product.
Yep.
We called it, you know, the what if of service providers at the time, because
Yep.
no one was really doing it except what if at that point.
Yep.
You know, and so that was my foray into tech and also billing.
Yes.
So the tech and infrastructure around billing, the regulation around billing, and also the tech and understanding how tech can support scale, you know, which is where I think its primary place is.
Interesting. So you sold the 3 jets that you had, and then you moved into software.
Yeah, correct.
And then what happened then? What happened with that business?
Then moved out of software ultimately. I had the same investors as the gyms.
Yes.
And when you do that, and you lack a technical investor in an entirely technical business,
Yeah.
you know, you're really at limitations. So we migrated out of that tech space.
Yep.
And I started cooking away with the model behind the 12-run product.
So how long did you work on the software product?
Well, concurrently at the midway through owning the Jets clubs,
Yes.
and I was in tech, and then we invested in more tech, which was Go1, the fastest growing learning management software in the world.
Yeah, we interviewed the founder.
Yeah, so Andrew and Vu, they were actually our builders of our first prototype.
There you go.
And so in that, they introduced us to the concept of Go1, and we invested in that as seed investors.
And when you say we, that was the original investors that you pulled together
Correct.
for Jets?
Yeah, the same block.
Yeah.
So I was an non-executive director of Go1
Yes.
in its first few years.
Oh, you were?
Yeah.
I see. Yeah. And then, okay, so you're working there, but then you kind of had this idea for 12.
Tech. I thought tech would be the answer.
Yeah.
And then when I realised that there's limitations in non-tech owners of tech businesses,
yes,
no tech founders,
yes,
I went back into what I know, which was getting back into bricks and mortar fitness businesses.
Interesting. Yeah. So whatever happened to that company? Because you know, one thing we try and do here at Foundr is kind of, you know, you have an extensive amount of experience, you know, starting and growing and scaling businesses, and it's always incredible and helpful for people to learn from your experiences. Was there anything you could share that you wish you had have known? Because I know, like I was at a wedding in Byron Bay this weekend, and I met a guy, and he has a similar kind of situation. He has a few F45s,
yep,
franchises. And he said to me, you know what, look, Nathan, there's just not the scale that I'm looking for, right? You get capped out, right? You can only fit, you know, let's just say 150, 200 members per club. But then after that, it's just, you're capped out, right? You can't do anything more. So he's working on literally like a software solution that he believes is infinitely scalable, right? So it's the same kind of thing, searching for more, right? Or how do you build a bigger business that's extremely scalable, that you not kind of have these limitations? So what can you learn? Because a lot of people do try and move into building a software company, it's really difficult, or they try and move into a brick and mortar and it's really difficult, or e-commerce, and you think because you've done it once or you've had some success that sometimes you get tricked.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear, what experiences do you have with that, you know, moving and transitioning, and how did it end up going? Is that company still around, or?
Okay, so a few things. There's definitely really valuable lessons in it. And in the tech building, you really have to apply very strictly an agile development methodology. And I'm sure you're well familiar with that, but you know, you really need to validate the customer and the customer needs prior to spending the money on building the infrastructure. Yeah. One of the really big issues we faced was we didn't stick tightly to a scope of works, and scope creep kills most projects. You ask an architect, you know, they quote on a project and the owner says, just move that door a little bit there, or we'd like the deck a little bit longer or bigger. Well, tech projects have that, but it's really easy to spend money quickly. And you don't even understand the implications of the changes you're making on the quote or on the scope of works.
Yeah.
And that's where a tech co-founder, if it's going to be serious tech, it's serious scale. You know, above the template platforms, you know, the WordPress websites or e-commerce
stuff. Shopify,
if it's going to be bigger than
yeah,
that,
yeah. So custom.
What you need to do is really look at what is the minimum viable product required to validate the customer. You know, one of my favorite quotes is, you know, no business plan survives contact with the first customer. You know, Mike Tyson puts it in a boxing context. Everyone's got a plan until I punch him in the face, you know? And the ultimate scenario is that until you reach that first customer, what's in your head is the perfect solution is just that, in your head, until you validate that with customers. So we caused big issues with our business by building a Ferrari to take the kids to school. We built an infinitely scalable, completely RESTful APIs, proper scale infrastructure, enterprise level security and scale. And we didn't have a single customer. And what that meant was the cost in delaying that launch really chewed up the capital required to acquire customers at the other end that we had validated.
Yep.
So, and then we struggled to find investment because we didn't have a tech founder, a tech co-founder. So for your friend, my advice would be to find a really seriously capable tech co-founder that has a cultural fit, a shared set of beliefs and a shared set of values, but isn't you, and applies some different knowledge. And that way you have a chance to build things lean enough to get to the stage of validating customers and scale after that.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. So what happened to that product? Is it still around or
No,
shutting it down?
the product's not around. I think that it still is an applicable product now. Yeah. I actually think it would work still. And I think it was a really solid business plan. But the fact that we used all of our capital before we started acquiring customers, and we couldn't go and find money because we didn't have the criteria of a tech founder. I remember sitting down with Blackbird VC when they first launched, and Nikki was a friend of the Cannon Brooks, and he just said, first criteria, you've got a scalable tech business. We believe in the business case. So why is there no tech founder sitting at the table with us? And said, well, because we knew the problem. We didn't necessarily know how to build the solution. And he said, well, I can't invest on the basis of that. And then go and find a tech founder and come back to us. By then we'd burnt through the capital and didn't have the money to keep the business going. Yeah. And so that's probably, on two sides. It's a great and really valid experience. It filled in my gaps in payments, which for gyms are recurring payment businesses.
Yeah.
International payments is one of the biggest issues with international growth of a gym franchise.
Really?
But that's actually my backyard now. That's something that I understand as well as a fintech founder. Yeah. So it through that experience, it really turned into a huge asset, because not only do I understand the mechanisms of scale for tech, but I also understand the mechanisms for scale for bricks and mortar. And so therefore they're complementary when you look at moving into international markets, where that inability or lack of knowledge would mean that you just simply can't do it without selling a lot of capital to acquire that, or equity to acquire that knowledge.
Interesting. So you shut that product down in the end. Unfortunately, it didn't work, but to your benefit, you took a lot of lessons away that you put into 12 round. When did you start conceiving? How long did it take you to conceive 12 round? And yeah, can you give us context what 12 round is for everyone watching and listening?
Yeah.
And when did you launch it? So how long did it start? Like how long did it take to actually get it up and running?
So at the very start of 2014,
yep.
I was out of my non-compete with Jets.
Yep.
I was at the final stages of the product that we built, the software product.
Yep.
And I really needed to get back into my comfort zone.
Yep.
I had the capital still to do that.
Yep.
And so I started to think, well, what were the things you loved about fitness? And what were your things that that made you successful in PT or in gym ownership? And I thought, let's embody that. And then what are the issues that fitness businesses face? So let's avoid those. You know, let's, you know, incorporate all the good things and try and avoid as many of the bad things.
Yeah.
You know, my time with Good Life and PT, one of the big issues with the fitness products or the group fitness stuff was timetables. You know, and you've been a member, so you understand.
Yeah.
Now this, and so over 80% of complaints across the counter at a big box gym, a Good Life of Fitness First, regarding group fitness, regarding the timetable. So I knew that boutique fitness, small group training was on the move.
Yep.
It was huge in the States, it was exploding.
Yes.
I had 42% growth in one calendar year.
Yep.
But it seemed to me to embody the issue of timetables. So first of all, that was the problem I'd set myself to answer and to solve. And the second part is that I felt that exercise was penance or punishment for most people.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, the only time that it doesn't feel like that is when you're playing sports. So I tried to break down that part.
Yeah.
So you've got sports. Why does sports feel different to exercise? Why does going for a surf feel different to going swimming laps? Or playing a game of touch football feel different to running laps or a treadmill? And the answer was skill. So it's team building and skill. Now group fitness has the team element, innate in its nature, but it doesn't always have the skill building element. And the skill building is what distracts you from the exercise. Right? So if you can embed a skill where you can work towards mastery, you kind of forget that you're actually meant to be focused on the calories or meant to be focused on the weight loss for that period. And so that means that, you know, you've got the next piece, which is engagement over a long period of time. So you know, working on that, discarding the things that I thought were going to be an issue, enhancing the things that I loved about sports, meant that I wanted to build a group fitness product that avoided the pitfalls of time, so it was convenient, that would drive adherence, and then I would also focus on the skill development. And I had a background in boxing, very low level, more of a hobby, but I loved it. I just didn't necessarily like getting punched in the head all the time. And so, you know, it was a situation where I thought boxing, in all of my S&C, strength and conditioning background, is used in all sports. It's not a pre-season for a league team or a union team or an AFL team or a netball team or swimmers where they don't use boxing for conditioning. So that made sense. Very low skill level to start, but a lifelong of skill acquisition. So that meant a long engagement cycle for members. And then I thought, all right, well, my S&C background delivers on the results piece. And if I use boxing, it's got an inbuilt mechanism for managing the class timetable fluently, which was rounds. So I thought, well, maybe that solves that thing I was trying to avoid. So that kind of brings together, you know, an exercise mode that felt like team sports, gave results to members, and was fun and convenient. And that's really the kernel of it. When that all came together, I started to using Steve Blank's quote of no business plan survives first contact with a customer. We then just set out to bring as many fitness friends as I could together and run, you know, different programs over a 12 round, which is a championship bout.
See, that was your MVP?
Yeah, it was my MVP. In a big box gym, in between treadmills, with 24 friends.
Wow.
And a program written on whiteboards. You know, and so that was it. That was what investors invested in.
And that was in 2014.
At the start of 2014, about March.
Because you strike me as someone that's like, because I'm a member, but I see the business side of it. I think the model is very, very strong. I think it's very, very smart, and I think it's playing on, like, there are some really strong trends as well. Like, you know, we have an office in New York, and I go there, and there's these kind of like cool, kind of funky kind of Orange Theory type boxing style things. I don't even know what they're called, but like it is a trend. Like boxing is very cool now.
Yep.
So I think you're obviously a strong strategic thinker. How long did it take for you to work that out? I'm just curious, like sitting there thinking about that, because it's really well thought out.
Okay, so the other thing was, in order to engage people, there has to be an element of emotion.
Yep.
And I remembered back to childhood of watching the Rocky movies.
Yep.
And you know, Rocky always goes through a period in every movie where he doesn't know what he's fighting for, doesn't know if he wants to fight. Some dramatic event happens and he gets his head into gear, and then the training montage, you know, the classic music starts.
Yep.
And he starts doing all that, hitting sides of beef, running up mountains, doing all that varied stuff. So that little bit of a motive was what I needed to really be the catalyst.
Yep.
I didn't have that originally. I knew that I liked that, but I didn't know how we make that manifest the product with that spirit and with that energy, that emotion. And so, you know, from the very start, where the idea was conceived in March 2014, it took me till October and you mentioned strategy, and my past experience slowly killing a product over an agonizing number of years. I decided that I was going to put my prototype, and I fully briefed the investors.
Yep.
I'm going to fail this as fast as I can, or it's going to survive the trial. So I profiled Brisbane, and it came up with 2 areas that had the most representation of fitness providers.
Yep.
So it had hot yoga, it had normal yoga, it had hot Pilates, it had normal Pilates, it had CrossFit gyms, it had 3 different 24-hour gyms, it had a fitness first, it had group fitness providers everywhere, boot camps in the park, even a community gym. And I thought that's where I'm going to put it, and that was Toowong in Brisbane. So then I spent that time trying to find a location in Toowong.
Yes.
In that isolated area.
Yep.
Because I wanted to fail it as quickly as possible.
Yeah, really stress test.
Really stress
the strategy, the model, the offering, the product, everything.
Everything, because it's no good if you're going to scale a product to put it in an area that has to avoid competition to win. So yes, there's blue oceans. We all understand that concept. But there's also red oceans. And it's kind of altruistic to pretend that my market's not going to come by cannibalizing existing providers. It's unrealistic. And so I needed to prove that I could effectively target existing providers' products. And you mentioned F45, there's an F45 there as well. So it really needed to do that. And then I wanted to have a strategy where actually we looked for areas that had great representation and demonstrated spend on fitness.
Yes. Because
inevitably, as areas develop, fitness providers go there. So we want to always be looking over our shoulder. And so, it demonstrated that incredibly quickly because of at the start we were still looking, which is the primary motivator for members to come in. We still thought, is it equally boxing and no start times? Is it equally, these things? But no start times is the thing that once you experience, you can't go back to normal bookings. And so it almost ruins you for every other fitness mode. And so that was the one we sort of went, right, that's actually really aggressive in terms of acquiring customers, because it not only creates a point of difference for those that need the shiny new thing, but it kind of ruins you for going back to a restrictive version of group fitness.
As a member, a new member, that was one of the best things for me. So you probably you're like, music to your ears, you probably hear it all the time, right? Because you hypothesize that.
We are lucky that we do hear that all the time. Otherwise we would be telling you a different story.
So you stress tested the MVP version. How long did that take for you to really know that the model was ready for scale and then start putting, setting up the franchise model?
Yeah, that's a really good timeline of events, because you can validate the customer, but businesses are made up of fixed and variable costs. And the 2 drivers of that are normally the size of the place that you need or the size of the physical tenancy in bricks and mortar.
Yep.
So your variable costs, you can fluctuate. Being an owner-operator, you can tweak the staff costs, you can tweak all of those things, but you can't change the location.
Yep.
And I didn't know what was the most efficient size to generate revenue. And so the next test that I had to do as quickly as possible was to test the size.
Yep.
So the first one was 240 square metres in Toowong,
Yep.
which is fairly big for the boutique fitness market.
Yes.
The second one was 115.
Yep.
Now, a potential franchisee actually came to me, he was a long-term friend, and said, I know you're not ready to franchise, but I want one of these.
Yep.
And I want it closer to home. He lived in Paddington.
Yep.
And so Milton's next door. And I said, mate, I can't let you take that lease because I don't even know if it's going to fit. And so I said, look, I'll take that lease. So you'll have the gym close to you, but I'll operate it and I'll own it.
Yep.
And so tested that, and even up until the very last day, I was terrified it wasn't going to work. But I needed to bookend the sizes.
Yep.
Of course it's going to work in a bigger space.
Yep.
Maybe not economically, but certainly from a practical sense.
Yep.
But I didn't know how small it could go.
Yep.
And when you have aspirations of going into Southeast Asia and really expensive real estate, say in New York or LA, you have to know just how economical you can be.
Yeah, and that's a big sell point to like franchisees as well, right?
Of course,
like,
it's really big.
Yeah.
But you can't say that unless you've tested it. Because otherwise you've got franchise agreements going out there and leases being signed, and the franchisee's holding the baby. So I wanted to validate that.
Yep.
So then we sort of worked in from that. It is a little bit tight. So the minimum is now 130 square metres, just to give that bit of overflow.
Yep.
But no shortage of sites in that bottom range because they're just so damn efficient, And I would argue that we are probably the highest yielding per square metre franchise in the world.
Yeah, wow, that's
given
a big
that
call, man.
Given the 115 square metre footprint in boutique fitness, because we generate a lot of activity within that small amount of space. Do 300 members at Milton, and that's more than 120 sessions a day, for members. So.
Interesting. So, how long did it take you? So, like in terms of timeline, was it about a year and a half before you could actually start getting franchisees and even the documentation and working out the systems and all that's like that must take ages, right?
It takes ages. I was really lucky that having been a franchisee, I had a head start on the terms and conditions side of that.
Yep.
Because that's a really complex minefield.
Yeah. What do people need to know if someone was watching this right now, listening? What are some key things or things to avoid when you say complex?
Yeah, one of the things is if it's not clear from what the franchisee is telling you of the intentions of the franchise, look at the outcome of the clause and work your way back to find the intention.
Yep.
And what I'm talking about there is royalties.
Yep.
So, as an example, the intentions of a fixed fee royalty must be to get as many locations as possible. Must be, because there's no other way to grow that revenue.
Yeah.
So I look for things like, and so I wrote this in from day one, a percentage of revenue royalty, because then I'm equally invested in growing your revenue. Yeah. And as a franchisee, that's the biggest doubt that you have, the level of investment in your success. All right? So straight away I wanted to throw that flag up and say, if you don't make any money, we won't make any money, but we'll still have to service you. And that was a really important piece. But, and so to go back, we waited until March 2016 was the timeline. So it was effectively 2 years of testing, of launch and testing.
Yep. And during that time period, you weren't just testing the offering, you were testing like the operation, the systems, even your lead offer, I think is genius. Your 28-day challenge, but you want people to form a habit, and then if you do form that habit, then you get there's a light at the end of the tunnel. You get the heart rate monitor,
How
which
did you
I
go
didn't
with
get.
that?
Yeah, I didn't get it. It was hard for me, but yeah, I was like, yeah, but like I thought it was so genius because like people can learn that. Like I was even thinking like, literally, I was thinking like, because I don't know how much you know about our business, but we sell other products, right? Like obviously we're a media company, but we sell online courses and magazines and books. And I was thinking, okay, well, if someone purchases a course from us, and we know that we want to make sure they finish that course because it's in their best interest and it's our best interest, and we have these really awesome refund, no questions asked guarantees. A lot of the time, like it's in our best interest. We know it's an incredible product, so we want to get people to go through it. So what kind of thing that can we put out to incentivize people to actually go through the course? And I thought that was just such a it was so smart, and I think it was like. Where'd you learn that?
Well, it was an interesting mix of psychology and commercial sense, right?
Yeah.
So, and I'd be lying if I said this was totally my idea.
Yeah, of
as
course.
well.
Yeah.
Obviously, the marketing team and the franchisees High Performers Network, and everyone worked through this. But we tried to, again, just like creating a business model, think about what are the things that we want to avoid, the behaviours that we don't want to encourage and influence. And what are the ones we want to enhance, right? So anytime that you give something away, you are making the assumption that price is the issue, where it's never the issue. It's always value, right? But if you don't know what the product is, and boxing has some misconceptions, particularly our version of conditioning for boxing, as opposed to sparring, there's misconceptions still. So the idea was we were getting 85 to 90% conversion off free trials because the only thing that people were still scared of was the product what they thought it was, or were they going to end up boxing? So we realized that we needed to get people into the door with the lowest possible barrier to entry, but we couldn't erode the value because just dropping your price, it doesn't give people confidence that you believe in the value of your product. So we were looking at how do we get people in? We know that 28 days is a routine building period, and the behaviour we want to encourage is 3 visits a week, right? And we know that the behaviour is when you first buy, that's when you're most motivated. So we implemented the system where each week you'd get a call from the staff in that first 4 weeks to make sure you're on track. And then at the end of that, we wanted to give people a prize that used technology to motivate because that's more scalable. And that was where the heart rate monitor, the MyZone heart rate monitor came in. So we were simultaneously trying to get more people to try the product, but over a period that was going to validate them with the product. It was going to build a routine. They'd get to build relationships with the other members and the staff. And then we're using this engagement product like wearable tech to then enhance that ongoing. So the only other piece was that people didn't necessarily own boxing gloves. I know you did, but not everyone does. And so in some cases that's offered with gloves as well, because we can't do the guarantee because we can't give you anything back, it's time. So what we said is, look, at the end of the time, if at any time during this 28 days, it's not for you, you can keep the gloves and we're really grateful that you came in and gave us a go. It's okay, it's not for everyone. But given our conversion off free trials was so high nationally, I'm pretty confident that if they tried it, they were going to stay. And Netflix had already pioneered the, opt-out option. It's actually a blessing for members because they get decision fatigue. I don't want to have to physically do something to keep going. I just want to keep going. So that opt-out mechanism at the end. So removing barriers for entry over an intentional period of time that built routines, really targeted, following up to make sure that routine's set. And then if they're getting value, then as long as we're exceeding their expectations, then there's no reason that a high percentage of them wouldn't convert.
It's really smart. So I'm curious, like you guys are growing really, really fast now. How are you getting, how are you scaling like this franchise model? How do you acquire so much interest?
Well, we're really lucky at this stage. Majority of the sales are advocacy based. So one of the main barometers for whether you're exceeding members' expectation or meeting their expectations is how hard they'll advocate for you. So we know the Net Promoter Score. If you're investing in tech, one of the key numbers you want to know is what's your Net Promoter Score. Right? What percentage of your current members are so happy with your product that they will actively advocate for you. So we made a decision that majority of our growth, the majority, should be advocacy based.
Yep.
And that is members telling their friends, members investing, staff telling their friends or staff investing, existing franchisees helping us to recruit new franchisees.
Yeah.
And that's why there's a cluster effect. So when we open a club in a new territory, they very, very quickly cluster because they're all around that sphere of influence. But that's finite, just like referrals in a gym driving gym membership sales.
Yes.
That might be enough in the long run to manage attrition, to get you off the start and then manage attrition. But it's not enough to accelerate growth in the true sense of scale,
Yes.
the hockey stick that everyone that does startups talks about. So that is currently the place we're investing the most amount of time and money.
Yep.
Is answering the question of okay, well, how do we open up new markets? How do we get New Zealand off the ground, Singapore off the ground, the UK and US off the ground? You can't just rely on advocacy. So you need some sense of cost of acquisition of customers, sales process on a franchise level as well as a franchisee level.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. So are you guys just in Australia now? You're international too?
We opened our first club in New Zealand.
Yep.
We have a franchisee opening at the end of this year in Singapore.
Yep.
And I hope we sign off this week on a site in Twickenham in London.
Oh, wow.
And so, and potentially Orange County in the US if we find the right franchisees.
Interesting. Yeah. And so those international franchisees, is that inbound or that's paid acquisition or what is that?
At the moment, it's still inbound. It's still advocacy.
Yep.
But it won't be when we go to populate those areas in clusters.
Yep. Okay.
Now that we know a lot more about what our customer is and who they are.
Yes.
And when I say customer, I mean customer for each stakeholder.
Yep.
For a franchisee, we're spending a lot of time and money in analysing who their customers are.
Yes.
And where do those lookalike audiences exist? And rather than saying to a franchisee, here's a map of Melbourne and you pick the area and because you live there,
yes.
We're saying here are the best areas that you should invest in.
Ah.
And so our strategy for international is seed populate with the first.
Yes.
And then profile the community with the knowledge that we have of Australian consumers.
Yes.
And then actually nominate the best 10 sites around Twickenham as an example. And not let them set them up in areas that aren't the most likely to succeed.
Yeah, interesting. Because a lot, I don't know much about this space because I've never looked at buying a franchise, but usually is it how it happens is I like this brand, I want to open up my own and I get to choose a location.
It is.
Yeah, okay.
And more often than not, it's where you live.
Interesting. So you guys are going. You find so you get inbound and you find the one, right?
Yep.
Just to start off.
Yep.
And then you're going to analyze that area and you're going to create this cluster all around. So then,
Yep.
It kind of spreads.
And cherry pick not the emotional preferences of the franchisee.
Yes.
But the areas that profile as the most likely to succeed.
Yep.
So what we know about the analysis is that we can generate an estimate of
Yes.
performance, and that the operator will influence it 40% down or 40% up
Yep.
in performance.
Yep. Wow, interesting.
Right? And so, but we need to pick the ones that have the highest estimated performance,
Yep.
and that comes from data.
Yep.
And data is king in franchising. I mean, the old way to do it is to let them choose the suburb they live in.
Yep.
The new way to do it is to analyse them and give them some direction, because you need to be the authority and the expert even when it's an emotional decision.
Interesting. So, when it comes to the model, are you able to talk numbers around, like, you know, you said you guys don't do a fixed fee, you do a percentage of revenue. Are you able to share kind of what that model looks like?
Yeah,
if someone,
of course. And this is something that's moved significantly over the life, because part of the validation model is to make an assumption about price point.
Yep.
And how that will work. And then to continually flex that against the number of average members that franchisees are able to acquire.
Yes.
The break-even numbers that you're targeting. And so you go over this constant state of flux, and franchisees that come in at the start bear witness to this flux.
Yes.
Those that come in later, you know, now in our third year, they're getting the benefit of the accumulative knowledge. So we have to cohort them.
Yep.
We have to put them in buckets.
Yep.
A club that launches now breaks even based on our approval of their lease at 120 members.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, our average pre-sale is 90 members.
Yeah, wow.
With a minimum pre-sale of 70, or you can't open.
Wow.
Right.
So you make them test.
Yeah. And so we handhold that entire pre-sale period, because you will have to keep pushing your date of opening back until you get to 70.
Yep. And you've got a playbook for how to do the pre-sale.
Yeah, and it's prescriptive. This is one part of time where it's one part in their journey where it's literally day-to-day task driven.
Yep.
You know, and so dedicated staff that are with you for that whole period.
Yep.
And so, you know, so we know from the formulation and the results what we can yield out of that. So the 120 member break even is our criteria in our modelling as to whether you can sign that lease or not.
Yep.
Because if we wouldn't sign the lease, you can't sign the lease.
Yep.
No, and because you can't move the location as easily as you can change the operator. Yep. And so, you know, a club that opens at 120 then gets 30 to 50% growth of that membership base in the first 6 months.
Yep.
And so you can see at a capacity of 250, 270, maybe 300, you know, in depending on the maturity, because obviously people visit a lot more when they start.
Yep.
So a more mature club can have a higher capacity.
Yep.
Because people have dropped into their natural rhythm a little bit more. But if we look at that, you can understand how achievable, you know, those numbers are. And that's the model. As a new franchisee signing up today will see it.
Yep. Okay, interesting. And when it comes to, I guess, the marketing side of things, do you guys charge a marketing fee, or do you help?
No, we incorporate that. It's all incorporated into the single fee.
Yep.
And so we see our job as two. There's two fundamental systems when you're open.
Yep.
And that is to keep members and to get members. Right? So in keeping members, you've got to exceed their expectations in product delivery environment and supporting them in their journey, right? Because as we all know, it's cheaper to keep members than to get new members.
Yep.
You know, and in getting members, you've got to tell the story and you've got to close the sale. Right? It's that simple. But in order to give them the material and the system and the tactics and the strategy to close the sale, like the 28-day results pack, you've actually got to give them a compelling narrative, story, and content that is of a level which you would expect if you're investing in a significant franchise. It can't be, you know, clip art on a poster. It's got to be professionally sought content, curated videos, curated content that is consistent with the narrative. And our narrative is, what are you fighting for?
Yep.
Because that ties into the emotion of you're there for a reason,
yep.
You know, and everyone's got one. And so, you know, our content is that. Then our strategy is the low barrier to entry offer.
Yep.
Right? And then our tool to keep them is exceed expectations. That's it. And it's a pretty straightforward formula.
Yeah.
You know, you just got to execute.
And look, we have to work towards wrapping up, but a couple last questions. One, I think another thing you guys did very smartly, and I'm sure strategically, is getting an ambassador for the brand, which is Danny Green, and associating you know, like you see him
Yeah.
like on the screen, and you know he's you know customizing the workouts and all that side
Yeah.
of things. I think that's really smart from a trust building standpoint because he's a well-known boxer, and then also aligning with his brand elevates you guys as So that was the first thing. I'd love to hear like. Do you think people should be doing that in when they're trying to take on any industry, aligning with an ambassador?
Yeah, it's not always as easy,
Yep.
given the cost implications.
Yep.
I was very fortunate that Danny had a mutual circle of friends.
Yep.
And I was able to do some work with him to
Yep.
get to know him in launching some of his concepts.
Yep.
And when I pitched the idea, he was authentically excited because it was the training that he did.
Yeah.
And from a sports science background, I knew that.
Yeah.
But I needed him to validate that.
Yep.
It's like singer-songwriters. Critical acclaim is more important than the customer's acclaim or the fans. You know, because it has to come from someone who's lived and embodied that. Yes. And if they can honestly say, this is like the training that I used to do, and that's where you get the trust.
Yep.
But they have to be genuine.
Yep.
And he was.
Yep.
And so and his personality is uncompromising. So it wouldn't be any other way.
Yep. Love that. I think that was very smart. So you think if you can do it, definitely 110%?
If you're confident that they align with your values and your culture.
And then talk to me around kind of company owned. Do you have many company owned? Can you share that?
No, we've got none. Except for the ones that I invested in originally, which aren't company owned, they're privately owned.
Yep.
So there are none.
Yep.
And from time to time we've owned clubs.
Yes.
As we've reshuffled them, as we've taken them over and then had high performers take them off us.
Yep.
You know, but we all, as an executive group, own clubs. So the CEO, Michael, owns a club. Yep. The COO, Jonah, owns a club. The GM owns 2 clubs. I own one and a share in another club. So decisions we're making are affecting us, and that's critical.
Yeah, because that's how you further test. And
and you're selfishly making decisions in favour of franchisees as well. And that's critical, because if you don't have empathy, just like a good trainer has empathy for members, a good franchisor should have empathy for franchisees and not rule from afar and make arbitrary decisions that affect other people and not them.
Interesting. Okay, so last question. What's next? And what's exciting for you? And any parting words of wisdom that you'd like to share?
Well, what's next for us is using technology. So again, leveraging my skills, even though they didn't pay off at the time, leveraging that experience to bring technology to bear. And to bear, I mean in areas, not for the sake of ticking the technology box, but for the sake of scale, for the sake of quality assurance, right? They're where I think that they can genuinely improve the experience of the customer and the franchisee. So we've got customer-facing technology being released in November, December, be available at the start of next year. And we've got a suite of technology making the manager and the franchisee's job easier and more rewarding. And Simplify, Amplify has been the theme of this year. And I can honestly say that by the end of the year, we'll be a long way towards meeting those objectives.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And any parting words? Where's the best place people can find out more about 12 Round or yourself, or any words of wisdom you want to share?
Well, I think that first one, 12rnd.com.au is the best place to go to find information about the franchise. Obviously, I'm available on LinkedIn.
Yep.
Or by phone and email as well. Hopefully not too much phone.
Yep.
And the final piece, I think, would be 2 things. Leonardo da Vinci's simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. It's the most difficult thing to get in a business model. Simplicity, and hands up, I'm not there yet, we're not there yet, but we work towards it every single day. We think about what we can subtract, not what we can add.
Love that.
And the other, is to not avoid the problems, because the problems are the reason you have a job and a role. So a quote from one of my long-term clients and friends was that be grateful for your problems because if they didn't exist, someone with less ability would have your job. And I think, from a point of view of business owners, we seem to think it's avoiding problems that makes our job enjoyable, but it's actually solving them that adds value.
Yeah, putting out those fires.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, look, thanks so much for taking the time, Tim.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been a great conversation.
Cheers. Thank you.
The Foundr mission is to help you create an ass-kicking business and help you learn straight from the mouths of world-class founders. Get your free printed edition of Foundr magazine featuring Sir Richard Branson. Just cover shipping and handling at foundr.com/Branson.